Hey there, Stoked fans. By the time you're watching this, we'll already be hard at work on our all-access preview of Star Trek Online. That's right, our NDA has been lifted, so we'll give you our personal in-depth previews of the game. We wanted to kick off the new year right, so we're going to release it as its own separate episode. Check JupiterBroadcasting.com this Friday, January 1st, 2010, for our special Star Trek Online preview episode. Welcome to Stoked, episode 17, the ultimate Star Trek Online podcast. My name is Chris, and
I'm
with me right here...
Yeah, that's me.
Jeremy.
Good
job, Jeremy. There you go. Although they probably got it from the lower third.
Yeah.
Well, what are we talking about on this week's episode of Stoked?
Why don't we talk about Star Trek Online?
You might think we were going to talk... I was going to say, you might think we're going to talk about Star Wars: The Old Republic. You were wrong. This is a Star Trek Online podcast. So you can go ahead and click off now if that was an accident on your part. And you might also say, but Jeremy and Chris, there's nothing to talk about with Star Trek Online. It's been a short week with the holidays, the
You'd
New
be wrong
Year's.
again.
Oh my goodness. We've got a lot to talk about. At the top of the show, we kind of have a discussion segment we want to get into. It's kind of the framework of it is 2010. How is it going to look for Star Trek Online?
Now, 2010, as many of you might know already, is...
next year.
Next year.
Which is soon.
Yeah,
We're recording this on the 26th of December.
So it'll come out like a day or two before the next year.
Which is almost perfect timing, Jeremy.
Yeah.
And then we'll also go over some news. We've got a little bit more information about the Klingons. We're not going to spend too much time on that, but we have just a couple of things. Also, there's a Name That Starship competition, and we've got the screenshots of those starships that you get to
So if
name.
you haven't already seen them, you can take a look at them. And actually, I had to go through and dig these up, because once you already send in your application for the names, you can't find them anywhere.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh,
so
did you send in? Did you send in?
Yeah.
All right, we'll save it.
Yeah.
You going to tell them what they were on the show?
Sure.
All right, but we'll save it. I have
can
not
remember
named
them.
yet. All right, then moving on, we've got a couple of articles. Warcry got to play the first 3 hours or so of the game, the tutorial section of the game, and they've put up their thoughts. We'll give some commentary
Several sites
on that.
actually have done that. And
I think we've both played the tutorial, so we'll talk a little bit about where we agree or disagree with
was that a beta leak?
I don't think so. I don't think saying something exists is a beta leak.
Oh, okay.
All right, well, let's get into the discussion. So, 2010, Star Trek Online comes out
On February
what?
2nd.
2nd.
Here in the U.S. It's
In
the
the
5th everywhere else.
So that gives you the whole year. At the end of the year, at this point in 2010, we could theoretically be sitting here saying, how did we do? How did 2010 work out for Star Trek Online? Where are we at?
We very well may.
And so I'd love to be able to look back at this segment then and say, okay, we nailed this or we didn't nail that. And I want to talk about that. And the first bullet point I want to talk about, because this is one of the things that gets batted around
Hit
a
me
lot.
with the bullet.
People don't necessarily like to talk about this. Some people love to talk about this. Is the game going to be Trek enough to bring on hardcore fans in 2010?
Well, Chris, I think this is yours because you are the more hardcore of the two.
I am. You know, it's interesting. We got a letter sent to our tips inbox, tips@jupiterbroadcasting.com. And it was a nice lengthy email, which usually I'll defer to Jeremy, but I went ahead and read it because he forwarded it to me and said, no, you really do need to read this one. And it was asking, well, we've talked a lot about, and this is the next bullet point, but I'll just say we've talked a lot about the new Abrams Star Trek movie. We've talked about Deep Space Nine and Voyager, and I don't like Voyager, I don't like the new movie. This guy's point was Trek is Trek, and in whatever form it comes in, you don't really get to pick and choose between your different Treks. It's all Star Trek. And
people that might have been upset with the way that Star Trek Enterprise was brought across, they're still Trekkies.
Here's an interesting
it was still a
point.
Trek product.
To me, something's either Star Trek or it's not, and I haven't come across something that's not Star Trek to me. If it follows some of the basic formulas. I mean, for example, the animated series is very much Star Trek to me, but it really is not like anything else.
No, it's not. You could get away with a lot more when you're animating.
The motion picture and The Wrath of Khan were nothing like the original series.
That's
all.
true, yeah.
But they're still very much Star Trek, and I don't think anybody questions that. And to this guy's
point...
Well,
I think, for those particular examples, they are iconic enough that even if they're not...
Well, they're iconic because time has passed.
Well, what I'm saying is even though they didn't adhere to what the original series had set up, they changed it in a way that we now accept.
But there was some basic formula that they followed, which is a basic storytelling formula.
Yeah.
This guy's point, though, was, you can't really just say you either like some Trek and don't like some Trek. You either like all Star Trek or you don't. And to that point, it wasn't really until Voyager ended and I started talking to friends that like Star Trek and things like that, where people had comments and they were comparing Deep Space Nine and Voyager in The Next Generation. And I had friends, some people didn't like Voyager and some of them did. And to me, the idea of not liking one series over another never ever really occurred to me.
Because it was just Star Trek.
Even like several episodes ago, we went down the table here. Brian was here. Oh, and by the way, Brian probably won't be with us for a few weeks.
We vaporized him.
He got vaporized. However, we do have a sample of his hair, so we're going to reconstruct him in the transporter soon. But that's not until he's finished moving. Long story, but there's an episode about that, I'm sure. But just a few episodes ago, the three of us went down the line here and said, list in order of your favorite, your Star Trek series.
We did.
And I couldn't really give an answer.
Well, because you said that even the one that sat at the bottom, which I believe was Voyager, was still Star Trek. It was still great.
But it's a relatively new concept to me to put Star Trek series in order.
Right.
Because it's always just been Star Trek, and I just love everything Star Trek.
Right.
And the whole thing was, it was a whole new, not that episode, but just within the last few years, it's been a whole new concept to me that, I might not like some things over other things. And then it kind of, once you kind of get in that mindset, it's like, okay, now I really don't like this aspect of it.
Right.
So it's possible that will happen with Star Trek Online, though, in my experience, I think it follows a certain formula. I think it gets a few important things wrong, but I think you can't do a video game.
Well, even
without those things.
Craig Zinkovich came out and he was quoted for this several times around the forums. It still gets thrown around on occasion. When canon conflicts with fun will win.
Right.
So there are going to be times in STO where you will encounter things that are either completely unrealistic or completely in violation of canon.
Canon.
But despite even for the fact that it has to be fun.
In the past, we've heard canon is Bible.
Right.
Literally, that was the quote. So there's some conflicting information from Cryptic, but I do agree. Obviously, one of the first contention points is there's probably too much fighting.
Maybe.
But how do you do a video game? There's literally just not a lot of fun to be had.
Well, yeah, I mean that's true. By the time you reach, your first rank upgrade, you've probably destroyed more spaceships in your career than Kirk, Picard, Sisko, and Janeway combined.
Right. And not to mention Archer.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that guy too.
Yeah, that guy too. It is true, but then again, it's a time of war, which actually it is sort of a storyline justification. It is kind of but they blew some ships up.
They sure did,
and they did it well too. I mean, there's some pretty epic. They got some. Sorry, Jeremy. They got some fancy camera work in some of those episodes, following the Defiant as it flew around, blowing stuff up.
Kind of innovative for Star Trek, really.
It was, and it is because it's a time of war, and so you have storyline justification. And I think at a certain point you have to step back and go, all right, well, it is a video game, and I have to agree to certain laws of video games when I'm doing
like a big example of that is death penalties. We won't go into the details of how harsh they are or anything, but we already know that you're not going to lose your ship if it blows up. You do in other games like EVE Online. It's a much more bigger thing. When you die, you lose your ship. We already know that in STO you're not going to. So we know that despite whatever other penalties might be in place, if you die in space combat, you come right back and you can just continue with your mission. And that
some temporal anomaly, I'm sure.
Maybe
but some space anomaly. I guess
they haven't really worked anything into the storyline that we know about that's going to explain that, and that violates some people's ideas of what is realistic and what is canon.
But that's a perfect example of there's just certain laws you have to be okay with. And so I guess the original framework of this question was, is it Star Trek enough? Hopefully. I'd say yes. It's definitely not a game with a Star Trek skin. It's definitely a lot more than that.
Yeah, a lot of people that have been reading things online and jumping to the conclusions that this is just like a WoW game with a Star Trek skin. I can put those fears to rest.
It is not that at all. It is very much a Star Trek game.
Yeah.
There's very much Star Trek storyline. There's very much Star Trek
but by the same
stuff. But
by the same token, it's also not a Star Trek episode.
I guess what I would say, kind of bringing it back, is it's Star Trek as this motion picture was to the original series, as JJ Abrams Star Trek 2009 was to Nemesis.
Kind of reinventing the genre in small ways, but keeping the spirit of it intact.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
and I think if people playing it, if the Star Trek fans that are going to come to this game, who maybe aren't traditional MMO players, aren't even traditional video game players, if they're okay with those concepts, then they'll be okay with the is it Trek enough question.
And I think that Cryptic is trying to do a pretty good job of this with setting up the whole Path to 2409, explaining the game world and explaining why things are the way that they are in ways that fit with the lore. They're trying to do it, but some things you just can't explain away, like the death penalty.
Right. Now, the next kind of critical thing that I think will be for that will impact Star Trek Online success in 2010 will be the new movie franchise.
Yeah.
Now, we may get a new movie in 2010 or 2011, but essentially...
Again, with this new cast.
Essentially, there's going to be a decent infusion of a player base who's coming to Star Trek because they loved the movie.
Yeah.
And
actually, I have an online friend who I played games with for years now who doesn't like Star Trek. But she saw the new movie, and now she wants to play Stowe.
My wife is the same. My wife, obviously... My wife almost knows the episode titles because I've watched them so much, but she's never watched any of them consecutively.
Right.
She's not a big Star Trek person. She liked the new movie quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
She thought it was a good movie, and she enjoyed it. And now she's not going to play Star Trek Online, but there's people out there that will watch that and then want to go play. Well, I just watched this movie, and this is something that came out afterwards, so it must be along the same lines. The problem is there's a good set of people that do not like the new movie. I happen to be a fan of the new movie.
I would actually, I rewatched it again recently, and I think I'm not so much a fan of the movie anymore.
I don't know why. Why?
Well, a few major things have turned me off of it. One is that some of the characters are completely inconsistent with the original series, notably Uhura and Sulu. I felt that...
But Sulu was throwing a few pity lines from time to time.
Right.
And Uhura, essentially the same, with a little more.
When Sulu became more of a character in the original series, he was always portrayed as being very competent, except in that Naked Time episode when he was sword fighting. But he was always very competent on his game. He was the dutiful officer. I don't think
Are
that
you
I ever
talking
saw...
about just because he couldn't start in the new movie, he couldn't start to go to warp because the inertial dampeners were
That was how we were introduced to Sulu.
Yes, but it was also because it was his first time ever piloting that ship. And then later on, he kicked a lot of butt on top of the drill.
He did. Yeah, okay. So they tried to save
and he did some fancy flying later on in the movie.
Yeah, when he was avoiding the debris when they warped in.
And also just, when they warped right in, and when Spock was heading towards the bad guy ship to blow it up with the red matter, they warped in and there was torpedoes coming right at it, and Sulu got right in there and then they blasted them all.
Right.
I thought, that was, in a lot of ways...
But even if that was him piloting, they didn't focus in on Sulu and look what he was doing on the controls.
No, it wasn't. But he's the one driving.
Only if you know.
Through actions. Well, all right, okay.
I mean, everybody that watched the movie probably just thought that was Kirk.
That's a pretty weak argument. So what? I'm sure you got more than that because I
will further admit that Uhura was an almost nothing character in the original series, but the character that they invented out of whole cloth for this movie, I didn't really think that they needed to do that.
But don't you think it adds more complexity to the overall entire characters?
Sure, but I didn't think that it was necessary.
But you do agree that the lack of character development with old Uhura was inadequate.
Sure. Yeah.
So now that they've given her something, and being associated with Spock, who's a pretty major character in the franchise, is a pretty high position to be in as far as relationship status goes.
Yeah. So they just brought this nothing character up to.
But that also conflicts
now the new series is going to be Kirk, Spock, and Uhura. It's a new.
No. It'll be McCoy. It will be. You see, look, okay. So you're complaining they made Sulu incompetent, and then they make Uhura overcompetent because she has extremely good skills. She's able to translate the Romulan language.
Right.
She was, put on the bridge because of her specialty.
Mm-hmm.
But now you don't like that.
I don't. Maybe it's illogical. But those are my complaints. And that's not my only complaints. I mean, then there's the science of the whole thing, which
I agree with you there.
Might be explained later because we'll get into that. There was a bit of a voiceover from Leonard Nimoy.
I always hate that they invent something new like red matter.
Right.
But they do it over and over again in Star Trek movies.
I was just talking...
This device was a completely new invention. An awesome one.
Yeah.
To be sure.
Mm-hmm.
Red matter is not nearly as awesome, but it was a total invention. But I was just talking
to my brother the other day about why it was that he doesn't like Star Trek as much as I do. And he said that when we were growing up and watching The Next Generation, there were long stints of episodes where every single episode was solved by either Geordi or Wesley inventing something out of thin air.
Is that good or bad?
I don't think it's very good. I think it's sloppy writing.
I agree, but I loved that stuff. Because if you follow the frameworks, if you follow like their laws and their technical manuals, and they if they have a component that does something else, and they say, well, we're going to combine these three things, and they're all the real things in the Star Trek world.
Well, if we shove the deflector dish through the food replicators.
Well, no, nothing like that. But when they do talk about like when they wanted to basically turn the main deflector dish into one big torpedo blast to fight the Borg cube,
right?
In Best of Both Worlds, that was literally like 2 minutes of technobabble. But I really enjoy that part of the thing because I know the components they're talking about.
Sure,
you're right though, because it's not really anything they had to do in the original series. And to give credit, they really didn't do it in the new movie except for with red matter.
Yeah,
but they had to have some sort of.
But the entire concept of the anomaly that created this alternative universe was red matter.
Yeah,
it was just, well, we got to do something.
Yeah,
and then you know what? I after rewatching it just the other day, there's this whole conversation with Spock leading the entire bridge crew through this. Oh, so we're in an alternate reality.
It's forced, but they had. But see, what you have to give them credit for is how much they're able to accomplish and set up all new characters, all new timeline, but still having solid references to past stuff.
Yeah,
all this stuff, plus to have its own entire storyline and plot, while doing all these things in 1 hour and 45-minute chunk, is a lot to get done.
I'm not saying that it was a bad movie.
All that stuff is done, and if movie 2 doesn't completely rock the house, that's a total failure. I think movie 1 was awesome. While they set up all that stuff, while we met every character again, we met every backstory, and we met the relationships, and now all that stuff's set. The foundation's laid for movie number 2. Movie number 2 rocks it. I think Star Trek Online is gonna just gonna benefit directly from that.
Okay, 2 things. One, I find it interesting that the hardcore Trekker among us is more accepting of the new movie. And maybe it goes back to what you were saying about everything Trek is Trek by definition of being Trek.
I think if podcasts existed in 1979 when the motion picture came out, or 78, whatever it was, I think we'd be having the same exact conversation for that movie.
Oh,
because it's nothing like the original series in a lot of ways.
The second thing is I want to get back to the original point that does the success of the new movie, is it going to have a big impact on Star Trek Online?
Make it without that?
Well, I think that Cryptic has already acknowledged this in some way by bringing on Zachary Quinto, the new Spock, to do voiceovers within the tutorial. So this is going to be one of the very first things that players encounter is the voice of the new Spock.
Right.
Even if, they need to kind of nail home the fact that this is not that timeline. I think they need to get that in there.
It's interesting because it does the exact opposite. This is a prime storyline. This is, if you say the events of the movie never happened, this is the continuation of that storyline. Love the idea because that is a 40-plus year history that we all know. And to continue it and to make it evolve and to bring it to the next logical step is an awesome way for me to continue to get something out of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that line is so blurred by bringing in Zachary Quinto that I just don't get it because immediately to me it says, oh, well, that's Spock.
Right.
And then, but you're not anywhere in that Spock's universe at all.
That's right. That Spock does not exist.
So there's this understanding people are going to need to have that if they're not kind of tapped into the news sites, the review sites, and shows like this, they're going to have this weird kind of confusion about it.
There is that potential, and I think that a lot of people will actually be turned off by that. Fans of the new movie. Or young
people expect the new movie world.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially with it coming out next year, and the talks for Star Trek, what is it, 12?
Yeah,
are in the works. So we know that they're batting around scripts and everything.
Star Trek 2.
Probably.
Yeah.
But we know that movie is in the works, and there's probably going to be some press about that. And the latest movie just came out on DVD, so there's a big blitz over that, and they'll probably have a collector's edition coming out on February 2nd. If they know what they're doing.
Then again, I think we got to give the players a little more credit. They'll figure it out. So,
I think that gamers will probably figure it out and be very accepting right off the bat.
The question though was does the movie franchise need to continue to do well in order for Star Trek Online to do well?
Oh no, I don't think so.
Really, I think it does.
No, I think
you need more than the hardcore fan base.
Well, no, I think,
and I don't know how you get that without the success of the movie.
I think the success of the new movie is already there. And I think that it's only going to get better because people are kind of dumb.
Okay,
even
but
if the next movie
the next movie comes out, and it's a total devastating flop.
I don't think that it can be, to be honest, because
all right.
a lot of that is driven behind the scenes by the studios and everything like that. But the new fans are going to like the new movie, regardless of what it is, as long as it tells a good story.
Okay.
Doesn't have to be 100% old Star Trek for people to enjoy it.
All right.
So the point of the new audiences is already built and will remain there.
And the only people even a movie that does badly still has, millions of people see it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's like you still get, there's that saying that any marketing is good marketing.
Right.
So there's still going to be, if I go see the new Star Trek movie and it's a total flop, I'll probably love it. Yeah. I walked out of Nemesis and I thought, yeah, I'd see that. In fact, I did. I saw Nemesis like 3 times in the theater.
Oh, geez, how?
Didn't love the movie, actually. And that was one of the first times I walked out of a Star Trek movie going, I don't, maybe it was actually Insurrection. The first time I walked out, I walked out of Insurrection, I went, I think I just saw an episode. Episode of Star Trek.
Yeah.
And, but even then, still, I saw that one multiple times. And, it's like, there is a certain success rate even on a bad movie.
Right.
All right. Now,
so no, I don't think that the game's success is going to be dictated by the success of the new franchise. I think that it's already done its job in bringing new people to Star Trek.
Okay.
And if they want to be gamers, they're going to look up
I see your point. Yeah. Okay. That makes sense to me. So let's talk about one thing that I'm worried about might be a potential issue.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how to say this lightly, so I'm just going to say it. Is one of the potential threats in 2010 for Star Trek Online, is it Cryptic itself?
Huh.
And here's what I mean is, boy, Star Trek is just this massive thing. It's different for everybody. And
I mathed you guys a few episodes back with how many people came to the 2009 convention in Las Vegas. I don't even remember the number, but it was like almost 3 times what BlizzCon brings in.
Right. And, there's just this epic amount of history to it. There's this wide range. I mean, I could even see a guy like my dad who grew up watching Star Trek, the original series when it originally aired, has continued to follow it more casually, and but would still be willing to, probably more inclined if it was on a console, but he'd be more willing to pop this game in and check it out.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm sometimes worried that it's almost too much for one single company to sort of wrap around and
handle.
Paramount and CBS, the longtime holders of this intellectual property, still screw it up constantly.
Yeah,
they make bad steps all the time, and this should almost be at this point in their DNA.
Right. But they license bad games constantly.
Yeah, and so there is going to be Cryptic. I feel is already under a large pressure from the game's fan base before the game's even out, and I just can't imagine once the game's in production.
To be fair, I mean, we've already lambasted Cryptic for their poor PR in the past. I don't see it improving significantly. I do feel that things will be a little bit better once the NDA is released, because we all know Cryptic themselves is under an NDA as well. So once more of that can be more freely discussed, I think things will improve somewhat. But we also know that they have a history of not telling us the whole story.
Well, here's the thing, and to that point,
getting their points wrong and jumping the gun.
What I wanted to say to that is, I've been thinking about it, mostly when I'm on the toilet going potty, that's
prime thinking time.
Cryptic does a lot of things so another area, I love Star Trek, and technology is my other area of focus and passion. And Cryptic, in a lot of ways, their PR acts like Apple PR, in that they want to have a very good message, a very controlled message, a very succinct message. So they'll release information in stages, and they'll release screenshots in stages, and they'll release bits and pieces here. The problem is that works for Apple,
and it works for technology in general.
The flip side is Apple it's a very one-way relationship. I go, I buy a laptop, I come home, I use the laptop.
Yeah.
With Star Trek Online, it's a much more porous, open communication.
Especially since we've already been told that Cryptic has their ears to the forum, to the community.
And the problem is, if you take a closed sort of Apple approach at your marketing, in a way, not that Cryptic does this completely, but there's some elements of this, but the community itself wants this two-way dialogue. There's no way for Cryptic to scale to that, because the community is going to grow. It's already too big for that kind of thing. And when the game's in production, it's going to scale so large that there's no way for Cryptic themselves in-house to bring in enough staff that would make it reasonable and profitable to sort of engage the community on the level they want. So what they have to do is they have to farm some aspects out. Instead of telling us the way it is, they need to be okay with the concept of us coming to them and asking questions.
Right. And then be willing to respond.
I think a lot of the issues surrounding the misunderstandings with the Klingons, which I kind of have a better appreciation for now because we've talked about it over at our forum at JupiterColony.com. There's been some some better explanations of what people are thinking and feeling, and I kind of have a better grasp on what's going on now.
Yeah.
And to me, it's really been a matter of communication.
Yeah, it has been from the core,
from the first standpoint to now. In fact, if you go back and if you look at the big trailer that came out for Star Trek Online, that's still on Atari's website. If you go to
that's the one that starts with the big 360 of the ship, and then it goes into the bridge and everything.
It's a Klingon narration. The ship warps in, and then you go into the ship. You pan around the captain, and he's looking at the view screen, and it's all about how you can play a Klingon. And you can take down the Federation as a Klingon,
right?
And you can, the way it sets it up is it sounds like Klingon versus Federation. If the Klingons blow up a starbase, that's going to directly impact the storyline for the Federation players. Right. It's not clear from that trailer, but if I didn't know anything else about Star Trek Online and I watched that trailer, I would unequivocally think that it's complete parallels in gameplay for both sides of the Klingons and the Federation.
Not only that, but that the PvP battles or the battles that you will fight for either side actually have an effect on the way that the war is going for either side.
And the problem is that could have been cleared up if some of the questions that were originally asked were directly answered. Instead of, here's your answer, and then we respond with the question, oh, no, we're not talking about that, but here's your answer for something else.
Yeah.
What happens is they tried to control a message, and but then the community had to work with what was given to them, and there was some misinformation. There was sometimes the wrong thing said at the wrong time.
Yeah.
Not to mention, Cryptic has the difficulty of having to comment and answer questions about a game that they're still developing and making changes to.
So what they answer one day might be either wrong, or because it'll change in a week, or it might already be in flux.
But the problem is while they're still figuring it out, so they're trying to decide what the next thing they should release to the PR outlets are, there's the community that's taking the previous answer and extending it from there.
Right.
Which is exactly what the community is supposed to do, because that's what makes the game successful in the first place, is a passionate, thriving community.
Right.
And that's a unique advantage to a Star Trek game, because it's a Star Trek community. Everyone has a common passion, a common history, a common love for this franchise, for this idea, for this property, and that is such a way to engage that community, and they're going to do that. That's exactly what Cryptic needs to do. But you've got to work with them on a more porous basis, a back and forth, not just telling them something.
Yeah.
And
you have to respond to what they get.
If they get that wrong, they will piss on the fire that's brewing in their community. And you have to evangelize
and burning
the core
pee
base.
Is bad. Burning pee is
right?
bad.
Especially if you got like a bladder infection.
Yeah.
Yeah. Drink cranberry juice.
Yeah.
But if you
a message from your friends at STOked.
Yeah, the more you know. But if you don't have an evangelized base who's going out there and twittering and blogging and doing podcasts and all of these things that get the message out to even more people, that is your most powerful tool as somebody in today's market.
Your point is that you're worried that Cryptic is just not big enough for the audience that they're
in
addressing.
Fact, I would say it's the exact opposite. I think Cryptic is approaching it with a big company mindset, like Apple. Control the information.
Oh, and you think that they need to be more down to earth, more fingers in all the pots.
What they need to do is work at the community level. Let the community, give clarifications when clarifications are needed. Give guidance and direction. But the community is the only thing that can scale with the game if it becomes popular. Cryptic will never be able to put enough resources and staff into the Cryptic PR department to scale with a hugely, massively successful game.
So you have to rely on your community to build your PR for you.
It's the only way to do it if you want to be successful. And if they don't quite follow that, in 2010, they're going to stifle the kind of raging fire that's beginning. And if you stifle that fire, you're looking at a much rockier, much slower start of the game.
Well, and that's the kind of thing that you can't, it's almost impossible to reignite at a later point in time.
Absolutely.
If you don't keep your momentum going, it's almost impossible to get going again.
Yeah, and it's a little bit of a more trickier situation than it is with Champions Online, or it was earlier on with City of Heroes, because there's not this 40 plus years of baked in love for the franchise.
Right.
And so there's people that are there with a whole nother level of investment than anything I think Cryptic's ever seen before in any other property they've ever produced before. Yeah. And so I think there's maybe I'm fearful. I believe Cryptic understands that. Our conversation with Daniel seemed to indicate that.
Yeah.
But then again, on the flip side, there's actions, and those actions speak louder than the words.
Well, I'm not going to make any judgments quite yet, because as I mentioned, they are under NDA. And we don't know if
everything could change around open beta time and around release.
Right. And I'm really hopeful that it does, because I've already spoken with a number of crypto. We have contacts with some of them. Some of them are fans of the show, so thanks. And they respond sometimes to things that we say on the air, and it's great. They seem like really down to earth, really passionate people
and
about what they're doing,
with what the community's saying. And
yes,
you find them in the forums and things like that.
Right. And they've got their finger on the pulse. They seem to, a lot of them anyway, but they just don't come out and show us. So I'm hoping that when the NDA
when they can,
when
they're in a little bit better position. Now, I still think though that they could have handled the communication with the Klingons. They could have. I don't know if they had to go to some NDA master at Atari and say, "We really have to address this."
Yeah.
And if they didn't see it coming, then they weren't interacting enough with the community.
Yeah, absolutely.
So either they didn't see it coming due to they didn't have their eye on the ball, and maybe that's just because they're extremely busy making an awesome video game,
right?
Or they didn't address it properly when they did see it coming.
Well, or the third option is that it's changed so much since they started talking about it that they were reticent to actually bring out new information.
I'm sure there has been. I think that's probably in the long run. Looking back at it, I think that's probably what happened with the beta, with closed beta invites. I think there was some things that were assumed that some people said that then later on they decided to go about it in a different approach so that maybe they could scale the beta better.
Well, to be honest on that topic, I just think that they didn't anticipate the response that they got numbers wise.
Well, and that kind of goes back to my original point, is if they're ready for this kind of rabid fan base.
Yeah.
I mean, it's, I don't know. We'll see. But I think if you look at it, you've got, I think it is hardcore enough for Trek fans if they're willing to look at it, that it is the same kind of thing that the motion picture is the original series and the Star Trek 2009 is to
It's
Nemesis.
a reinvention of some things and a staunch...
It's a change of the format a bit, but it's a...
Right.
But at the other side, the reward is that it's a living, breathing...
That you are actually
evolving Star Trek storyline.
Yes.
So the benefit, in my opinion, outweighs the is it Trek enough? And it is Trek enough if you're willing to accept some of those concepts.
Yeah.
Then the movie franchise, I think we both probably agree, successful or not, the next movie and the future movie is already set up a fan base.
Yes.
And even if the new movie tanks, Star Trek Online is going to be fine.
Yeah.
The question mark...
well, like I said, I think that the effect that the movie has had on the potential of Star Trek Online success has already been made.
The big question mark, although I'm hopeful, and it sounds like you are too, is Cryptic going to be an issue for Cryptic's own success with Star Trek Online? Sounds like there's some potential there, but we both agree that the whole story could change when NDAs are lifted and whatnot.
One more bullet point on that. Cryptic is a gaming company, is an MMO company. So they understand not only the fact that they need to grow their product over time, but maybe their company needs to be able to grow and change over time as well.
Well, and I think
hopefully they embrace that.
They've met the challenge of Star Trek Online, in a way of like doing research and due diligence on the Star Trek franchise. There's things in the game that when you see it, you'll be like, somebody really knew Star Trek to get this right.
Right.
And that'll be a really feel-good moment for the player. Because there's a few of those just in the playing that I've done. But there's a whole other aspect, and that's understanding the lifelong Star Trek fan. You almost have to have been one yourself. I'm sure there's plenty of them at Cryptic, so I think we'll get there, but we'll see. And, it'll be an ongoing thing that we cover on the show.
But to be honest, there are some major things about the Trek universe that I think will be overlooked, and there were always going to be the hardcore fans that aren't getting what they want, because their focus has been on something like, for example, the Romulans are not a playable faction at release, and there's a good amount of the audience that was what they wanted to do, and they're kind of effed. So hopefully
for now, I mean, there's always possibility. That's the great thing about the MMO sort of market is, unlike a lot of other games, when Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 comes out, the essential game is set.
Right, that's it. Unless they somehow have a downloadable content.
But you look at like Champions Online and look at all of the different things that have changed in Champions Online since release.
And it's only been feedback. Like 4 months, 3 months since release, and they already have a new power set, an entirely new what you might call a class has been added to that.
Yeah,
and that was free. You didn't have to buy anything. So so that puts them on a good track to be able to give us what we want. Really.
Yeah. Yep. We'll see. We'll talk about it more as the story develops. One last bullet point on that is ZAM ran a contest, I guess, or I don't know if it was voted or if they decided, but they
said voted on by their community.
The community says that Star Wars: The Old Republic is the #1 anticipated game of 2010, followed by Star Trek Online. Though BioWare kind of go set things up with the community in their forums to get them to go vote. And I use the term vote loosely, but
and they kind of told people on their forums how to cheat the system a little bit.
But
so we don't know exactly how accurate. But actually, there's an article that came out with it, and they did a very nice write-up on Star Trek Online. So there's some good points made in there,
and the link will be in the show notes if you want to check that out.
It sure will.
All right, should we move on? Let's a light dusting of a little Klingon news.
Yeah,
just to kind of touch on a couple of things.
We don't want to get our butts set on fire again.
Yeah, we kind of took a beating last time. After the last show came out, episode 16 came out, Cryptic held a Ask Cryptic session about Klingon gameplay.
Yes, they did. It was a two-parter.
Yeah, and the main thing is it sounds like is people really wanted to have people had a lot of questions regarding PvP, and they tried to address that. Now, was there anything in particular from this conversation? There's just a couple of things.
Well, again, something that we did mention last episode is that a lot of Klingon players are concerned with the fact that they're not going to have any PvE content. Well, this Ask Cryptic Part 2 lays it out for you, some of the PvE content that is already in the game, and that they do have plans to add more. So there are things like it's not entirely PvE. And maybe that doesn't sit so well with some people.
PvE, the player versus environment would be like more of a scripted type thing. Where you would go and you would interact with an object.
Or artificial intelligence NPCs.
Right.
Yeah.
And then they're more mission based, and then there's the PvP where you're just literally going and fighting other players of the game.
Yeah. Now there are PvP maps called war zones that are open zones that people can join and take on objectives. Those objectives are PvE based. And if they're
as a team,
if
or
they're
what they're called,
if you warp in, if you warp in with your house, let's say you're 5 birds of prey, and you go into this war zone and you're going to take it over, and there's no Federation players, you can still progress. There are still objectives within those war zones that you can defeat, and you can win the zone without having to ever see a Federation player.
So the house is to what a fleet is for Federation
they're
players.
Equivalents.
And you can, as a group, you can go in there as a team, and you can share the XP and things like that, which is a cool way to do it.
Right.
Now, they also will have deep space encounters. And now, is that like when you're flying through sector space and you run into another ship?
Yeah, these are like the random encounters that have been talked about before. And Jack Emmert actually compared them to Baldur's Gate random encounters. That's a bad comparison, Jack. You kind of failed there.
Is that? Why is that bad? I don't know about Baldur's
because... Well, it's just bad. You're going to have to take my word for that one, Chris.
All right. Well, I remember Final Fantasy walking around and you have that and then it would... Yeah. And then now you're fighting.
Yeah, it's closer to that.
And you do have a chance to run away.
You can see it coming, so maybe it's more like Zelda. Zelda 2?
You don't always have a chance to see it coming.
No, you don't.
Sometimes.
But anyway, those exist on the PvE side of things, and you can take on those NPC federations and advance through objective-based encounters like that. So there is still it's probably just regular old space combat, much like the Federation side has patrol missions.
But it's definitely not as... Yeah, it is a lot... You know what? It is probably a lot like patrol missions because it's definitely not as in-depth as the Federation side of content.
Yeah. No, there was an interview about a month ago that mentioned basically that patrol missions were not very good.
The feds
reading between the lines. Yeah, that was the Federation side of things. It's basically they're boring. They're not very well written. They're ways to fill time between episodic content.
They are, but then the thing about it is if you don't want to do it, then that is a perfect opportunity to go do some PvP.
Absolutely.
If you feel like you're just and this is the thing that I didn't do in Champions that I now looking back at it regret, but I didn't fully understand it.
Okay.
If I'm grinding, like I am so grinding right now in Champions, it sucks. Why don't I just go jump in PvP?
Are you rewarded for PvP in Champions?
I don't know.
But you would be in STO.
I would be in STO. So if I'm feeling very grindy and like I feel like I'm just taking forever to get through a patrol where I just go here, blow 5 ships up, go here, blow 5 ships up, go here, scan a thing. Boring. Or I go jump in the player versus player, and I get just as much. Or
now,
more
to be
XP.
fair, it's not that big of a bone to the Klingon players because if their only choices are go into PvP and advance and have fun against enemies, or go do these boring patrol-like missions,
right? My gut tells me
they do kind of get the short end of the stick there.
My gut tells me based on the air quotes here feedback that they've gotten over Klingon gameplay. That's going to be one of the very first things that gets added to in post-launch content.
Yes. Now, we already know they're aiming for a 45-day patch. Daniel Stahl was nice enough to tell us that. So hopefully those Klingons will be getting even more in that 45 days.
Yeah. And then if that happens, I very well may be sitting there scratching the old beard going, you know what?
Maybe I should go play a Klingon.
I could play a Klingon. As of right now, I'm going to have a toy Klingon.
Yeah.
I'll have a toy Klingon that I go jump into every now and then to go do some stuff.
You know, somebody put up a thread in the Jupiter Colony the other day about if you could play any faction in Star Trek universe, which would you play? And I had to think about it, but the honest answer is Klingons.
Really?
Now,
maybe the Borg. That might be fun for a little bit.
But I would be a role-playing Klingon. And this is probably why I'm not going to be doing it as much.
What do you mean by a role-playing Klingon?
I loved Klingons in DS9. I thought that their culture, their backstory, their traditions and everything was...
Well, they're definitely one of the most developed alien species in Star Trek.
Yeah.
So
I thought that being
I still don't know what you mean, though, by role-playing. Like
I would probably act like a Klingon. And I would try to learn the Klingon language as best I could to get my points across and yelling at the others and
so you would
defending the honor of my house.
Right, you would try to take, okay, I got you.
Yeah.
All right, yeah. And maybe you'll get a chance still.
With
Romulans, what about, you wouldn't play like a Vulcan? Those are pretty cool, right?
No, Vulcans really are pretty much the antithesis of cool, to be honest.
Yeah, all right, okay. What about Borg? Would you be tempted?
No.
Really?
I want my own brain, thank you.
Okay, all right. Oh, wow. Imagine if you could do a way to network players together.
I don't want you listening.
Decisions.
Chris, I do not want you listening to my thoughts.
That's Ventrilo right there, pretty much. All right. So moving on from with the Klingon stuff, if you want to talk to us more about Klingons, head over to jupitercolony.com, and there's plenty of robust discussion in there and civil discussion at that, which is awesome.
Yeah.
Which is nice because there's not always civil discussion everywhere on the net regarding these topics.
No.
All right. Let's talk about the name, that Starship contest, because I also want to hear what you named your Starship. So we've got 3 ships, right?
I don't remember what I named them all.
We've got a tier 5, which
they're all tier 5,
which is the
top tier,
right? And these are Cryptic original ships.
That's right.
So you wouldn't be really seeing these ships until later on in the game, but at the same time, they'd be kind of coveted. So it's kind of cool.
Sorta.
It'd be kind of cool because you're naming the class of a ship that would be pretty coveted by the player.
Well, and also keep in mind that every ship within a tier and within a class is customizable with all the pieces of the others. So I think like the tier 5 cruiser that they're having us name, is going to be interchangeable with I believe the Sovereign is a tier 5 cruiser.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like
so. Now that's the only one that I remember the name of. I put in my name
cruiser,
in the hat is the USS Jupiter. Jupiter class.
Give me a quick schooling on cruiser versus escort.
Escort is like the Defiant. The
small,
very maneuverable, fast, heavy, hard-hitting.
And a cruiser is more well-balanced?
Yes. The cruisers also have a larger crew complement.
But also very powerful.
Also very very powerful. Yeah. But they're pretty much well-balanced. They don't have as many forward-placed weapon installments as escorts would, and they have more energy. We've been told that like your energy levels at base have basically 200 units of whatever energy it is to split up among 4 different types. Well, as you go up in different ranks of ship, you'll get more energy, and the cruisers get more of any other class. So maybe a tier 1 cruiser has a 210, 215 allotment, while the other ones are only 205.
Gotcha.
Something along those lines.
All right. So we've got 3 ships to look at now. I'll be honest. Let's take a look at this. I don't know which ship this is. If this is the cruiser,
that is the cruiser.
Okay. So we're looking here at the cruiser. It's pretty cool looking.
Yeah.
It's not bad.
It looks like a cross between kind of a Sovereign and an Intrepid.
An upside down Sovereign with
because
that's like
it's very sleek, very streamlined, very Galaxy-esque.
Not bad.
Yeah.
Now, what did you come up the name for that?
This is the only one I could remember, and this would be the Jupiter class.
Oh, nice. That would be awesome.
Yeah,
that would be awesome. All right, the next one down is
this is the Escort.
I just don't like the look of this ship.
It looks weird. It
you
looks
don't
like some sort of insect.
Oh, I thought for
something.
sure you'd like it, so I'm glad you don't like it.
No, it's got the nacelles are like sitting up above the saucer.
Well, it's not necessarily the deflector dish is cool. The concept, that big old dish in the front. Mm-hmm. And by the way, this is a subspace anomaly behind it. We don't know anything, but there was another screenshot where it was named. Where they show this background and it's named, the screenshot's named Subspace Anomaly.
Huh.
We don't know anything much more about it, but
it kind of looks like the wave that emanated from the destruction of the Klingon moon Praxis.
No, that was blue.
But it was lightning-y.
Yeah, so was the Nexus.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah. This dish is just a whole lot of deflector dish. That's all I have to say. This ship's just a whole lot of deflector, and I don't know.
I don't remember. I think I named it like something from Greek. I think it might have been like the Zeus or something.
Not the Jupiter?
No.
Should have just named them all the Jupiter class. All right. Now, actually, this next one I really dig for some reason. Now, what do you think of this next ship?
I think it's goofy.
And what is this? This is a science ship,
This is
right?
the deep space science ship.
It's got this bottom nacelle that to me reminds me of a ship rudder or something.
Yeah.
And
it looks like a space yacht.
I love that. I really do for some reason. I don't know. I want that ship.
I named this after I think it was like Galileo or something. Something that's not already taken. I think there might already be a Galileo, but it was some ancient, famous astronomer.
I look at this and I picture like the top of the top of the, which is, you can't really call a saucer section anymore, but for lack of a better
primary
term,
hull.
Well, is this the primary, or is that the secondary hull? And the primary hull is where the engineering is.
I don't know.
But on top of the saucer is like a small mini dome of like, looks like, freaking laboratories are up in there and all kinds. Like I can see some science is going on in this ship.
Yeah.
And maybe that bottom rudder is to navigate the treacherous waters of, well, not waters, but the treacherous gases of nebulas and whatnot.
I think that's the deflector dish on the front there too. So maybe it needs its whole other section in order to be
that's
a
the
very
deflector.
high-powered
That's
deflector.
not a nacelle.
It could be both.
You know what though? I love the idea of like some sort of crazy deflector dish that has to be moved away because like.
But you know what? If that was a deflector dish and you were a Klingon, wouldn't you just shoot it right off?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's got these two little things holding it on, just blowing away.
But I would say that's always been my problem with every Starship design. Is if I'm a Klingon, the first thing I'm targeting is the bridge, that little dome sitting on top of the ship. That all I have to do is punch through the shield, and I can't believe it took till Nemesis before we saw the view screen get blowed out. That just to me was like, that's where I'm shooting at. And I thought,
well, maybe you don't want to shoot there because you want to take the ship for your own, and you need a bridge in order to run it.
They're always trying to blow them up though. In the movies and whatnot, they're always trying to blow them up, and to me, that's where I think Battlestar Galactica got it right. You put that bridge in the middle of the ship.
Yep. Protected by the entire rest of the ship.
Right.
Good point.
Yeah. Because all it would take is a collision even. Just a collision and that bridge is shaved right off.
Right.
But
either one of your nacelles is off.
Some interesting designs, and this is
I'm not going to call the science ship bad, but it's goofy.
I like it. The only one I don't like is the escort.
It's goofy as well.
Although if I could cause some ruckus with that deflector dish that's just massive.
You can kind of imagine that escort like flying around, doing defiant moves and stuff like that with those weird nacelles.
Yeah.
It's very insect-like to me, and I don't...
It's very raptor-like, like those little mini fighters that... God, I keep talking about Nemesis, but those little fighters that Picard and Data got in to get out of the Romulan ship. Yeah. It's very raptor-ish kind of thing.
Maybe inspired by.
Maybe. Either way, you know what?
Go put your name in the hat, call the crews of the Jupiter because you love us, and you can come up with your own names for the rest of them.
Now we're like BioWare over here trying to rig the system. All right, so there was which I didn't even know about this, so I'm glad you put this in here. Cryptic had a special holiday IRC trivia with beta giveaways, and it blew up in their face?
Yeah.
So tell me about this.
Well, I wasn't there. Because I knew that it was going to be bad.
How did you know? I didn't even hear about it.
Well, they do these trivia contests it's either Tuesday or Wednesday, and I avoid them like the plague because the IRC channel gets infused with these idiots. I'm sorry, you're not idiots. You're just not very smart. And there's thousands of them.
They're not
just
idiots.
Bombard.
They're just passionate, dude, and they just get all worked up.
And they like to be dumb on the internet. That's something that a lot of people do on the internet.
That's what we're doing right now.
Oh, yeah. But anyway, I heard that the IRC room had to split twice because there were so many people in there.
Big turnout.
And when they would ask questions, when Cryptic would try to do these trivia contests, they would ask a question and 30 people would say, Han Solo! And you could barely even read the question because they were just being idiots. They
needed to do
they were griefers.
Like an approved talkers only, like voiced. You can voice where you say these people have voice and these people don't, and you can toggle it during the...
Yeah, but trying to control an entire room or three of
but
that
how
many
do you
people.
do something interactive on that scale? You know what you do? This is what you do. You guys need to work with us. We'll get you hooked up with live view streaming and coming in calls. I was thinking about taking calls in this episode.
In this episode?
We're not going to do it because I didn't get it set up, but
we could do that sometime.
It would take just launching Skype and then giving
Well,
out
and some of our
hardcore
fans have asked us about a Q&A session, maybe to put on our iPhone app or something like that.
I think we should. I think we'll do that. I think we'll start taking calls, and if nothing else, we'll put it in the STOked iPhone app, which you can all link. I'm putting links to our exclusive STOked app, which is for the iPod Touch or the iPhone. And we're going to start putting some exclusive content in there just as a thank you for helping support the show.
Right.
And you can also support the show by going to jupiterbroadcasting.com, and there's a donate section on the right side.
Yeah, a little PayPal thing.
We're going to,
real easy.
If we don't integrate it, or what we might do is put some calls in show and then some calls maybe not in show, depending on the content of the call or whatever. Yeah. We'll see what people like.
So be really good, and you might get to listen to yourself.
So, and when we do that stuff, we'll coordinate over at facebook.com/Jupiter Broadcasting, and probably in the forum too.
Yeah.
And we'll try to get a schedule when we're going to do a live show so that way you know when to tune in. And then, and we'll give out the Skype ID in the live show.
Yeah, so that's something to look forward to.
That could be fun.
Yeah.
All right, so going on, do we want to talk a little bit about some of the information we picked up on Nimoy?
Oh, absolutely.
This came out the day after we recorded the last episode.
Yeah. So it's been around for a while. Quinto. You've probably already talked about this with all your friends because you're nerds and you love Leonard Nimoy, and so are we.
Yes, and we know exactly how you feel.
It's worth talking about.
And if you watch the video of Nimoy, the first thing that jumped out at me is he's talking about stuff that seems to be relevant to content that we really haven't heard much about. He's talking about Romulans are a topic of like voiceover that he's doing. He's giving like the Leonard Nimoy history of Romulans, which I love.
You know, the whole trailer of him, it's titled Leonard Nimoy, so you know he's going to be in it. But the first thing you hear is that space in his gravelly old Vulcan voice.
What's this note you have here about Cardassians?
This is a quote that he says, "The Cardassians chose a path that would lead them to hope and prosperity. Many hoped this alliance would last forever. It did not."
Now, he must be talking about an alliance with the Federation?
Maybe.
Because
because that's where the path to 2409 has left them. The feds have been giving them, you know, I always, in my mind, for the Federation is the USA. That's what it is in my mind.
Really?
I cannot separate them. So every time I think of the Federation, it's our country.
You just pissed off 30% of our audience.
I am sorry. It's psychological. I blame Gene Roddenberry. Oh, there's the other 70%.
Yes, well done, dude. You did that in like a 30-second time span. That's impressive.
I have been alienated.
He also has a quote in there, "The truth behind the destruction of the Romulan homeworld may be the harbinger of the greatest threat the Federation will ever face."
The truth behind the destruction of the Romulan homeworld. Well, that just implies that the Hobus supernova might not have been an entirely natural phenomenon.
And I think there's been hints. I think Cryptic's got a couple of things up their sleeve. And I kind of would like to know what's going on a little bit because I don't want to get like a false sense of excitement, but we know 8472 is in the game, and we know they're shape shifting. We know that they've like impersonated Klingons.
Yes,
but we don't know why or what's going on there.
Right.
We know that something happened with the destruction of Romulus with that supernova.
Right.
And it sounds like there's more to that than we know now, but we don't know what.
Right, but I just love that line because it really sets you up to start your own speculations on what's going on.
Anything from closed beta players or anything regarding this stuff. So it's just like not even in the game yet or something.
Now, to be fair, that could be Admiral level content that we have been hearing very little about, if
anything.
It's
just awesome, though, because I feel like, I've got a good grasp on where I'm at in the game now. But there's
so much more out there.
Sounds like and I would have just dismissed it as, oh, that's probably just Cryptic pie in the sky, something they're hoping they're going to do. But when you're laying down the dollars for Leonard Nimoy, you're probably going to put that content in the game.
Now, where do you think these voiceovers are going to sit in the game, though? I mean, you and I were talking about this a little before.
Here's what I kind of visualize. So every time you warp into a sector, you get like that flyby beauty shot of the ship. When you enter, the system and your ship flies in. And then I imagine cutscene. Like a flyby of Romulus and maybe an animated destruction, and it'll be Leonard Nimoy reading that.
So the quotes from this video are several different intro videos of some sort?
Yeah.
That's a good idea. Yeah. I was just thinking that this is going to be like the opening trailer. Like the first time you load the game up,
maybe you
get some sort of "this is the world that we live in"
that's the
sort
thing,
of thing.
That's your expectation is much more realistic and much more doable. My expectation is like this entire subset of content that nobody's heard about that would be epic crazy and probably not realistic, and I'm kind of getting my hopes up.
I hope they do yours.
I know, but I think it's more likely it's going to be yours.
Well, and that would get back to what we were saying earlier about really having to nail the point home right up front in the game that this is not the JJ Abrams verse.
Yeah.
Maybe that's it. Maybe that's how they're going to do it.
Yeah. A quick
Leonard Nimoy gives you a history lesson.
A boiled down version of the Path 24-9 in a 5-minute game trailer that opens up and plays. And I would think that's probably extremely reasonable. That is probably the way that they'll inform new players of what they've just gotten into.
Yeah. Instead of just slapping him in the face with Zachary Quinto and then taking Spock away.
Yeah.
That would be mean.
Yeah. All right. Now, the good blokes over at Warcry, which we haven't mentioned for a couple of episodes. They had a chance to play some Star Trek Online, and you might have heard of that game. And they played a little bit of that, and they wrote up a pretty good write-up on their experiences. Now, this is a guy who sounds like he's been a little detached from the world of Star Trek Online. He writes it from the perspective of someone who's just kind of coming into it for the first time.
He's an MMO gamer.
And just happened to get a beta invite. Whatever. I mean, seriously, he's like, well, I wasn't going to play, but my wife kind of twisted my arm, so now I'm going to play. And, I just tripped over this beta invite, and so I went and plugged it into the computer, and that computer brought up this game here. I mean, I'm like, what? Come on, buddy.
How many people had to...
Either you're BSing me, or they're handing these invites out completely randomly.
To everybody but us.
Yeah. Well, no, we're in beta, but...
We bought it.
Yeah, that's true. We did buy it, yeah.
Yeah.
But the article is interesting from the perspective of somebody who hasn't been following it as closely.
Right. And that goes back to the previous conversation about new fans to the genre or to this game.
Mm-hmm.
They need to be introduced to certain aspects. There's some things in this article that us having played beta are going like, well, duh. Duh.
Yeah.
But then there's other things that...
He mentions, like one of the things he mentions is it's hard to find stuff.
Yeah.
And the truth is it really is sometimes way harder than it should be to find stuff. But that's because the maps and all that stuff are still in development. And that is kind of the responsibility you take on as a beta tester.
That's right.
And you're helping them kind of figure out what they need to do to tweak those maps in order to make them more playable.
That's right.
One of the things they show, one of the screenshots he shows, which is something we haven't seen a lot of, we've only seen a couple, maybe one before, is sector space.
Yeah, these are very...
And sector space is, what? How would you describe it? It's
well,
like high-speed,
it was
high
also recently
Astrometrics view?
referred to as astrometrics view.
Yeah.
It's kind of an abstraction of the sector that you're flying through. It's supposed to be that you're at very high warp, and this is
right.
You wouldn't actually be able to see anything at warp.
Right.
You wouldn't see a planet or a system off in the distance and decide
you're going so fast.
Right.
And instead of just having like your ship there with stars streaking, which would get boring after 5 minutes.
Right.
There is a navigatable sector space, and that's what they're showing in the screenshot.
Now, this sector space is an adaptation, I try to consider it as this anyway, of things like flight path systems in World of Warcraft or stuff like that. It's long-distance traveling.
Dude.
But you have your hands
better
on.
than anything like that.
But it's an adaptation and an evolution of that same concept.
That's like saying that the human race is an adaptation of the trout. I mean, it is so much farther.
But it's
beyond.
true.
Well, this is what I'm saying. It's just like it's so much further beyond that, though. It is. Okay. So I've recently taken to playing with headphones.
Okay.
I've never been a big headphone player because I've got a pretty loud sound system with a big subwoofer, and I crank it up, and I'm in that sucker. Headphones, though, you pick up minute details, and this. I think one of the reasons why Cryptic doesn't show sector space is because looking at it in the screenshot, I'm like, that looks kind of plain.
It is an abstraction. I mean, it's not real.
It's like this third world you go into, and they have, and this is the point about the headphones, there's little musical hints and tones and sounds and kind of an airy quality that makes you feel like you're in this out-of-body experience. It's very subtle. It's just one of those little touches that I was just like, hot damn, that's awesome. You don't capture any of that in the screenshot.
No.
And now I kind of realize why.
To be honest, this screenshot looks a little boring, but sector space is a great idea.
Oh, it's the best way to boil down travel over. Space is big, guys.
Yeah.
Turns out, if you actually had to travel for the amount of time it would travel, nobody would be playing this game. So the sector space is a great way to do it, and they've done all these little refinements, and this is why we're not seeing any screenshots of it, because it would only work at best in a video trailer, but these video trailers are so fast-paced, they can only show it for like 5 seconds at most.
Well, and even then, it's entirely in flux. And just as we were saying earlier, Cryptic seems very hesitant to put out anything on something that's going to change. We know that this is going to change.
Understandable. The flip side is there's a community out there that's already trying. If you don't answer their questions, they'll come up with their own answers in a way, and that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Even if they just had somebody on the forums just stopping by every once in a while and saying, "Nope, sorry, you're wrong,"
or hey guys, check out Sector Space. It's a work in progress. We plan to do more, but right now this is where it's at. You don't even have to say you plan to do more. If you just you always have to remind people. Just like we'll say JupiterColony.com 5 times, because most of the times people.
I think that was 6.
Yeah, well, people only hear it 5 times, and we say it's 6.
Yeah,
you've got to every time say, "This is a work in progress, guys," but here's where we're at.
Right.
Sector space is one of those things that's awesome, but it just doesn't really work.
That is especially true for new MMOers, which there's a huge audience coming into STO that I haven't previously encountered.
Despite my World of Warcraft experience, I would consider myself a new MMOer because I've played World of Warcraft for 6-7 months, Champions for 3,
right,
and that's pretty much it.
But there are people that have never touched an MMO in their life, but because this is Star Trek, they're going to do it.
Oh, this is interesting. These screenshots are no longer available. Oh, this one is. Okay.
And so some of those people don't understand things like that the game will change after release. And so nailing that home is something that I think is important.
Here's a shot of this is still from the Warcry article. Here's a shot. This guy we haven't seen a lot of these, so it's neat that he's posted this. This is the shield effect.
Yeah, there's a shield bubble.
He's being shot, and you also can clearly see the 4 quadrants of the shield.
Right.
So if you're looking at the screenshot here, you can see the phasers aren't terminating on the ship themselves, but they're hitting a wall of energy, which is the shield. And then there's these blue outline around the ship.
Yeah, kind of a UI element that sits.
And that indicates the status of that guy's shields in that area. So, for example, if one of those quadrants of shields is missing, then your shields are down there, and you're going to be able to take direct damage if they hit you there. We haven't seen a lot of screenshots of that in progress in a still form. They're in the trailers, but they happen so fast you don't get to see them. So,
and you might not even see them unless you go frame by frame. Kind of pick them apart.
Yeah,
some of you guys have.
The shields is an interesting. The way the shields work is an interesting gameplay because you have to manage that. That's an aspect of the game that you need to
have power levels that increase not only how much shield you have, but how quickly they regenerate.
Right, and if you don't manage it appropriately, you will die.
Yeah,
and you will not be able to complete it. So it's
Chris knows all about dying.
I do. I'm doing better than you expected, though. Come on.
Yes, you are.
Yeah, so
which is still not very good.
No, part of it is the time thing. I'm still getting a lot of fun out of it, but there's like guys that would get to just play it a lot more than I do. But I still have a good time, and I can catch up a little bit.
Well, yeah, like the last beta window, you had to log off halfway through to go edit STOked.
Yeah, the last beta window I couldn't come into for a little bit because I was trying to get stoked out. And I had to end the previous beta session so I could edit STOked. So it was just, the things I sacrifice
for you.
I know the very game that
I
covered.
For you guys.
All right. Do we want to talk at all about MMORPGs STO preview? It's a lot of ground we covered,
because I put some screenshots in your folder, so might as well.
All right, we'll
mention
it.
Now, there's one thing that he mentions that I don't think has come up before that might have been some sort of a scoop.
Okay.
When you're in ground combat, there is a function that you can use to pause the world.
Oh.
And give orders to your bridge officers.
Oh, do they talk about that in here?
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah. So that idea would be that you don't want to if you're too busy fighting, you don't have time to leverage the great gameplay element of your bridge crew that's down there on a mission with you.
Plus, maybe just because of the way that your bridge officers are set up, they're not being as smart on their own as you want them to. Like there's the whole expose exploit system. Maybe you need them to use their special ability right now. So you just hit pause, click on it, and bam, as soon as you unpause, they will use it.
I have not seen this unit. They have a screenshot. I'm showing you in the video version, hopefully right now, of a unique, strange new life that they've obviously explored and seeked out, and it's in the game here. And I don't recognize that uniform at all, but it's very cool looking. It's very unique, and there's something.
It looks like an adaptation of a Starfleet uniform, so it's probably something you can do in the trailers.
He's in a starbase, I would guess, with something exploding or burning behind him. Right?
Yeah.
Very epic looking.
Yeah.
For sure. Interesting example though of what some of the character customizations might be.
Yeah.
He's not quite an Andorian because he's a little shorter.
It's almost gray alienish.
He's got some green to him, right?
Well, like, the stereotypical gray alien with the big cranium and the big dark
from the flying
black eyes.
From the 50s. Yeah. Now, this next screenshot from the MMORPG.com article is one.
You want to talk about it?
I want to talk about it because it's.
Tell us what it is, Chris.
It's a shot, an overhead shot. The camera is spun around, and what you see is it's a character who's beaming out, and he's standing on a transporter pad.
Oh, okay. So that's probably something that'll be in the game quite a bit.
It is
beaming in and out of places, and
now this is I'm gauging by looking at the character. I can't really see it that well, but I believe this is a shorter character to begin with. So the perspective is a little thrown off.
I think it's a Ferengi, so they probably made him to look like Nog.
Short.
Yeah.
Because you can adjust how tall your character is.
Sure.
One of the great things is in their character creator.
Yeah.
So it's perspective's a little off. But even then, the transporter pad is gargantuan.
Yeah.
It's
like the
huge.
one pad that he's standing on is probably large enough to hold his entire away team and some guests. And that's one quadrant, section.
It looks like one pad the entire cast of The Next Generation could stand on it. and beam out.
Yeah, comfortably with a banquet table in the middle.
But
they could probably fit the entire staff room from Next Generation on that transporter pad.
This is an example of there's certain laws you have to adhere to in a video game.
Mm-hmm.
This has to be big for a couple of reasons. Large groups, there's all kinds of collision problems in a small cramped space.
Right, you have to compensate for large groups of players
Gamers
and their bridge officers potentially.
Gamers will also become disoriented in small spaces.
They will.
And the camera will clip and screw up in a third-party perspective camera.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of, though, part of me feels like saying, so what? That's not my problem. You know what? I mean, it's their job as the game developer to make that work.
Right.
Because this transporter is too big.
Yeah.
And
now we've already seen shots of bridges, and Brian and I have gotten on them about how big they are. But
I disagree with the bridges.
They look better. They're
big
more
bridges,
proportionate than this.
Big bridges will work because there's chairs and consoles.
Even
that are
big
the right
hallways,
size.
Fine. Maybe sometimes they got to ship shuttlecraft through there.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you don't have to beam a shuttlecraft or
I don't
Defiant that you could fit on that pad.
So I'm a conflicted man on this issue because it's like, yeah, the set, it's too big.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to play the game where the set's too small.
No, that's true, because then you would run into all the problems that you just mentioned.
But at the same time, I want it to look right. And I think what the answer was, and I'll say this being a huge fan of all of the artwork and environments in Star Trek Online so far, but I think the answer was not to take the transporter that we all know and scale it and just blow it up and make it big, but to invent a new looking transporter.
Yeah.
Because you can get away with that. You can get away with, hey, you know what? 40 years down the road, guess what? Or 30 years down the road, guess what, guys? Transporters look different now.
They're big.
They're big, and make them, make something about it where
but
it just
this
makes
looks
sense.
like they took the transporter pad from Next Generation and just stretched it. The exact geometric pattern from the floor looks the same or very close to.
Yeah.
Bad.
There is a healthy argument to be made that in Star Trek, a lot of the sets have been too small because of budget reasons.
Right.
And
sure.
I hold
maybe they had to fit it in a closet of something.
For the bridge, for the corridors, for different areas of ships and star bases you see.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's a thread in our forum right now about maybe Deep Space Nine's too big. Totally disagree.
Yeah.
Deep Space Nine was way the F too small in Deep Space Nine.
It really was.
There was,
actually they did a size replica for the hallway at one point in the Star Trek experience in Vegas was made to be the exact same size as the promenade in DS9. And it was tiny for Vegas. I mean, it was only like 12 feet across.
Yeah.
If you had a crowd of people there trying to shop and trying to have a good time in Vegas, which DS9 should be somewhat equivalent to.
At least the promenade.
At least the promenade. It
was too small.
It was way too small.
So I think you can you can take that logic and you can dismiss the bridge size and the hallway sizes to an extent.
Sure.
Transporter, I'm having a tougher time doing that.
Well, it's a question of form versus function.
Yeah.
You don't need a transporter size that big.
This though is an aesthetics thing, and I'd rather have at the end of the day I'd rather have better gameplay, and I think they've taken the steps to do that.
Yeah.
Every time I step onto that transporter pad, at least for a while, it's going to bother me.
Yeah.
I'm going to look at that and go, not quite right. I don't know what they could have done. So that you can find those shots over at the MMORPG.com article.
Mm-hmm.
There's ongoing discussion to that. Anything else we wanted to cover from this article?
No.
Okay.
I'm done.
All right.
With that one.
Now, what about Ink Games? And they also had a hands-on preview they released some information about. They have...
No, I don't really... There's nothing really new here. I mean, everybody's been doing reviews. They've all been basically saying the same thing. Although, one...
you get to comment on... If you comment on the review, you'll enter into win a...
Yeah, at Ink Gamers, you can... We'll put that link in our show notes. Yeah. You can just basically have to put a comment. You can probably just say hi, and your name goes into a hat, and you can win a beta key. For the last week of beta.
All right. There you have it.
But another thing that's prevalent in all of these previews is that everybody really likes ground combat.
I do too.
Which is something that we were worried would be the downfall of Star Trek Online gameplay overall.
I'm actually, to be honest with you, I'm worried that there's not enough ground combat.
I feel the same way.
Not based on any beta play. I just know that I just foresee a lot of pressure for space combat.
Well, especially with how much time you spend customizing your bridge officers, the ground combat is the only time that you'll see them.
Well, and they're doing cool things like the crouch and the roll and the different maneuvers.
Right.
But so far though, I'll say from my personal beta experience, I'm finding a pretty good balance myself personally.
Okay.
But I'm worried that down the road there could be a pressure because
Well, like I said, everybody in these previews is saying, I want to see more ground combat.
Here's the flip side, though. I'm such an ass because I've been playing Champions this last week, and
you don't like it?
I get so bored being on the ground. I like fly in Champions just to not be on the ground, and then I'm like, well, all I have to do is fly to the next spot where I can walk on the ground. I'm like, I want to be back in my ship. So I say those things, and then once I actually get it, I'm like, well, but you know what? I'm a typical,
You're a waffler.
Yeah. All right. You want to cover a couple screenshots before we wrap this big guy up?
There was no articles out there that were just like, hey, here's some screenshots. So the only ones that we were able to grab were things from like the MMORPG article that we mentioned earlier that was a walkthrough of the preview.
Here, I'm showing a good shot right now of the bridge from Ink Gamers.
Yeah, this is part of their preview.
This bridge is a little Spartan. There's different bridges.
Red alert!
I guess there's 4 base bridges, and then like there's like 20 different combinations from each base.
Oh,
bridge.
okay.
So this is just one bridge.
That's similar to ship customization. Then you just choose pieces from different things.
I think so, but I don't know. I mean, we don't really know much about bridge customization at this point.
No, they haven't done like an article or anything about that yet.
And again, that kind of goes back to the community starts to fill in the gaps because we're being sort of baby fed certain facts when they're ready to talk about them instead of having a two-way dialogue.
That's right. That's a good point.
I made that.
You just made a good point, Chris.
I just took a couple of things I've heard about the bridge and I just said them out loud. Mm-hmm. And now someone out there listening is going to take that and
assume that you're correct,
which I'm not.
You should know better.
I may not be, and the problem is it would work a lot better if we could have just had a clarification.
Yes,
you gave us information about bridges, but then you stopped.
We had a question and it wasn't answered,
and it's probably because they don't know yet. But they don't want to say they don't want to know because they want to sound like they're on top of it.
Absolutely,
tough position. I think the current strategy is not working for them.
Yeah.
Here's another shot of a bridge, just to keep talking about bridges from MMORPG's article.
Yep.
It almost probably looks like the same bridge. They just released the...
Go back to the other one.
See, one angle?
Oh, yeah, you can tell by the captain's pad.
One angle, second angle. Yeah, and that's the same dude standing at the captain's pad. So
this is probably from the tutorial, and it's the same bridge that everybody's going to see.
Yeah. Here's a shot of a Ferengi.
Ground combat.
And we think this might be the same Ferengi that was beaming out because it's the article's from...
And he does look kind of short.
And it's from MMORPG. Oh, he's definitely on
something
the
I want
to
point out in this is the brown Elcar's window, the orangish brown one in the bottom right corner. Yeah. If you read those are tutorial tips.
They are.
So this is probably how they're going to be getting information to you. I like that it's like small and out of the way and everything like that. So
and you can close it. Looks like.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I just want all that crap out of my face.
Yeah, get out of my face.
I know how to do this. He's shooting at Borg right now. I don't want to be reading.
Right.
You know what I mean? All right, now here's a shot of a land mission. This is from Ink Gamers, and this is kind of not the best example of what the land missions look like, but at the same time, maybe it is in a way because there's some that we've seen that are just flush plant life and just all kinds of colors.
But you want a good variety of
now you're on a desolate kind of like
it's filled with rocks,
almost
buildings,
moon-like planet,
very industrial,
very industrial. So. Probably like a some sort of mining colony or something.
That's a good estimation.
All right.
Yep. I think that's a ship.
We've got a bunch of screenshots I want to throw in at the end. Is there anyone in particular you want to
go back to
out?
one because that one's one that I mentioned. No, one more. This shows a good example of the firing arcs.
Okay.
I'm not sure how this guy got it to display. I think I know how, but I'm not going to tell you. Ha! But anyway, this shows you the firing arcs of some of your weapons.
So you know what range, so the firing arc is in this shot here is establishing you'll be able to shoot things that are in this range of stuff.
It looks like about a 90, maybe 120
and that's up,
degree.
Down, or to the sides.
It's probably a cone, but they didn't want to put a big old cone attached to your ship.
Right. Although a cone could look cool.
Could be. It would be very three-dimensional
it's
by nature of being a cone.
It's interesting a lot of all these shots
have geometry.
Have the shots turned off. All right, maybe we should end on this Starbase 24 shot here. We've seen there's been more and more information coming about Starbase 24,
which is one of the first fleet actions that people will encounter.
And this shot is from Starbase 24, and there's wreckage floating in space.
Something I really wanted to point out about this is the first fleet action that you will encounter, and this was in an article where a guy played for less than 3 hours. So you play the game for less than 3 hours, and you're in a fleet action, killing hordes of
fleet action. Means a mission that you go in with a group of people.
That's tuned for a group of people. Yeah.
See, I have played this solo.
Mm-hmm. So and there are others that
I think that speaks pretty well to how it scales. But I could see how this would be an incredible amount of fun in a group.
Yeah.
This shot actually doesn't really show much of it. You see a lot of wreckage and you see some
fleet actions are a equivalent of if you guys are playing Champions Online. Open missions are an exact almost copy of fleet actions. They have scaling objectives. Each time you have to kill this number of this weak foe and then a stronger foe and then the ultimate goal. That's how they work.
All right. So I wanted to show this shot because people are going to see this a lot in game because it's just everything we're reading about it. It just looks like a ton of fun.
Yeah.
So we'll end on that one, and then I'll throw a bunch in the credits because I've got a whole bunch that I'm sitting on for that.
Sitting on them?
Yeah, I figure.
So they're nice and warm.
Now that I've decided I'm going to do that all the time, I want to make sure that I kind of incubate them like an egg, like a mother hen.
And then at the end of the show, they're hatched.
I just crap them all out.
That's terrible. All
right, everybody. Well, if you want to get a hold of us, you can email us. We are tips@jupiterbroadcasting.com.
Yes, we are.
And then, of course, there's also facebook.com/JupiterBroadcasting. That's where we'll be organizing our live stream events and our call-in episodes. And then if you'd like to engage with the community, you can do that over at jupitercolony.com. We have a form in there with a section just for Stoked.
It's called Stoked.
Not too hard to find.
No.
And extremely active and a lot of good information.
Almost too active sometimes.
I don't know. I love it because before the show started, I was like, well, you know what? I want to make sure I don't miss anything right before the show launches because you hate to start a show and then 2 hours before the show starts, there's some big news thing that we missed. I didn't go to Google News. The first place I went was our Stoked forum.
Oh, that's sweet.
Don't you?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, it's great. It's like the place to not only get information,
but make sure you haven't missed anything,
and to get sane commentary by the people replying because it's always going to have replies in there.
Yeah,
it's just great. It's an awesome resource for that kind of stuff.
So head on over.
All right, everybody. Well, thanks so much for watching this episode of Stoked. We'll be back next Tuesday.